I want to invite Tom Rowe to the podium. He's actually a founding member of the Convergence team and has worked tirelessly, not only on building a lot of the backstory and universe, but also to build on the creative side of what we're doing. And he's going to talk about the potential of virtual economies and community, right?
Yeah, essentially.
There you go.
How y'all doing? Okay. Woo-woo! Well, there's been a lot of talk about the history of the particular group that is producing what? You good? Okay. Can I see my first slide, please? Thank you. Let's see if this works. This probably works, right? Okay. All right, so I'm the creative director for at Convergence, and I'm responsible for the story. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about story. My history is pretty diverse. I've been in the military quite a few years. I did armament systems. I did avionics. I got out and then I started exploring just the computer industry, and I started with sales. But then I got into design. And it's a pretty cool history because it kind of made me the person that I am today. And from my youth, I was always fascinated by role-playing games, you know, Dungeons and Dragons, Traveler, things like that. I spent a lot of time doing that as a kid and when I was in the military. And of course, our imaginations are powerful things. If we're really good at using our imagination, and I think when we get older, sometimes we grow out of this, which is sad, we can really kind of have that willing suspension of disbelief when we go see a good film or something, and we come out feeling like we've been somewhere else. Hold on. So I'm the author of the sci-fi fantasy series, Silica, and the Silica Transition novel was the first book. As the author, I'm interested in telling stories, so this particular story that I'm going to tell you is the story of how we got here. And by we, I mean Convergence, okay? So I'm 53. I've been in technology for most of my life. When I discovered personal computing, the only computer that I could get access to was a TRS-80 at my local Radio Shack. So I spent enough time there to really drive the salespeople nuts because they knew I was poor and I couldn't buy anything. But I knew more about the computer than they did because it just fascinated me. So I just scoured the books and I studied and I learned. Well, my senior year, I was really excited because we got a TRS-80 Model 3, and just for some perspective, Trash 80 for short, just for some perspective, in adjusted dollars, that 32K machine is $7,700. So I would spend probably hundreds of hours trying to get a display that held 64 characters across and 16 characters down to show maps for my games. And I would actually build them out of the ASCII character set on the screen. And trying to get all that crammed into my 32 bytes of, or 32 kilobytes of memory limit that was on the machine. It was quite a challenge. So we flash forward 10 years, and it's amazing how much can change in 10 years. I was living in Louisville, Kentucky, and I was working at KET and Channel 15, for those of you who are familiar with it. And I did the graphics on the Chiron for the lottery, when the lottery was first started here. It was a great job, didn't pay very much, but it gave me some exposure in television graphics, which was cool, and I got to play with machines that were fairly expensive by that standard. And Andrew Prell came up to me, and in a similar story to the way he met Rob, I was actually working another job at a place called Mr. Horan's Computer Lab. And it was the only place you could buy an Amiga or a Commodore computer, which was kind of cool. So I worked there and I tried to sell some computers. I didn't sell very many, which is why I eventually went over to Channel 15. But Andrew Prell came in one day, just looking for technology, I guess, and he said, we're trying to build video games for arcades. And he said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to create virtual worlds for people to explore. He said, well, that's what we're doing. And so he gave me a gig of producing a little animation frame by frame using Deluxe Paint, which I don't know how many of you might recognize even what that is. But so you had to animate frame by frame, pixel by pixel, to create these little animations. And we were doing 3D, 360-degree rotations of little characters for a game that he was building called Cybertag. Now, he finally gave me a job, and we built this, which in 1994 was quite an impressive feat. You'll notice the one on the left is the one that was based on the Wolfenstein engine. So the graphics were somewhat primitive, but and the device you were wearing on your face was kind of like wearing a brick strapped to your forehead, and it would give you your neck aches, and a high percentage of people got physically ill because the lag was pretty bad in that VR technology. But then within a year, we did that. And that was based on a pixel planes technology, which some people in the room are familiar with. And it was a very expensive computer that rendered pixels at a high rate of speed, which in that day meant about 20,000 polygons a second, which, you know, there are probably people modeling hands for their character that have 20,000 polygons. So it wasn't much to work with, but in about an 8-month span, we were able to create a virtual reality simulation that was a 4-player multiplayer game in VR that just blew anything else that we had seen away. And we even had a joystick that was wired, and you could see your hand in front of your face in the virtual reality. And nobody had done that. So, and I hadn't even seen it again until recently, a couple of years ago, when Oculus put out their controllers, and you know, we're seeing the same things now. And I'm like, you know, we were doing pretty good. We were fairly advanced for 1994. We also had voice chat and 3D sound in that game, and 4 people could chat with each other, and the floating hand controller, which was really, it was kind of gimmicky, but very cool because you could actually see yourself in the game, which was awesome. Okay, so fast forward 10 years again to 2004. That's when I began writing something called The Lords of Silica, Technus. And it was going to be a series of books, but I was going to base it on a series of characters within the world of the universe of Silica. That novel later became Silica Transition. And I wanted to simplify the naming so that I could do just a whole series of books. Well, life imposes itself on you, and it takes longer to do things like that than you think. But it wasn't until the end of 2014, and I was watching a conference where they were showing off the Oculus Rift, and I don't think they were even distributing that. Maybe they were doing some kits. And everybody was just so excited about this, and I said, I should get Andrew on the phone. So I had his number, I gave him a call, and I said, Andy, I think this might be the time for us to try VR again. And I have a universe that we can build it around. Because in my mind, Silica Transition is just this tiny little chapter in a long, expansive universe. And in the transition story, you experience what it's like to move from a present day to living in a virtual universe and not realizing when that happened or how you got there. And the people that live in that universe have been there for hundreds of years at this point and have completely forgotten their Earth history, other than little inklings of it in their lore. So that's the foundation of transition. And so while we were discussing creating Silica Nexus, I said, well, it should be a prequel. Because at the beginning of Silica transition, I describe what I consider to be the penultimate 3D simulation that's completely immersive, and you get in a tank and you realize, you think you're there, and it all feels completely real. It's just like the perfect meshing of simulator and augmented reality, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm just going to describe it quickly because I know I'm burning through time. But imagine putting on or getting inside of a cockpit that's in a room filled with cockpits. And these are pods, and the thinking is that doors are going to open below each of them, and they're going to drop down into the floor, and they're attach themselves to tanks, and then you're going to go out into the battlefield and do battle. Well, the game that I imagine, when that canopy comes down and covers your face, it's already 3D scanned the entire room, anyone walking through the room, and is replacing them instantaneously. Maybe there's a flicker or something, but it's replaced everything it sees with a 3D simulation. And at this point, I can show you anything I want, death, mayhem, chaos, whatever. You're going to really believe it. You're going to be hard-pressed to ignore it. And that's the kind of immersion that we're talking about. So moving forward quickly, because I'm eating through time here. So here we are. Except for the internet itself, there isn't another revolution that is more exciting than what's going on with blockchain, decentralization, and the impact that this can have on bringing freedom back to the internet. Now, you may think the internet is free, but a lot of the things that are going on the internet are being controlled by massive corporations right now, and you could have a Twitter account, and you could have a large following, even millions of followers, and you can post something that you think is important and needs to be said, and because it doesn't meet with the corporation's requirements in some way, and I'm not going to be specific, but they could shadow ban you, and they've already admitted this on video, and you will never know that your users, your million users, aren't seeing that tweet. And that's wrong, you know? And so decentralization and the blockchain gives us the possibility of creating technologies that can replace something like that it can be handed out over thousands of machines, that no one person or entity can stop the flow of information. And that, you know, you could probably think of worst case scenarios where that could be a dangerous thing. But I think it's important that the internet remain free and that we find other ways to manage the really horrible things that we obviously don't want to propagate. You know, there's some easy examples like pedophilia, things like that. So we need to control stuff like that, but that's not what they're doing. They're just taking political ideology and using it as an excuse to block people's content. So I asked someone a week ago, I said, what do you know about blockchain? And you get this a lot. They looked at you, they look at me with that gaze, you know, like a deer in the headlights. And they know it's out there. They've heard about it. They know it's important, they guess. They haven't committed in any way. But I don't judge them because I had that same look just a few months ago. It's kind of like this. Let's see, where is it? Yeah, that's the, that's the look. And they give me this, and I've gotten this over and over again because it's like, yeah, I've heard of it, but I haven't really done anything with it. But I just don't think they realize this thing that's coming, you know. Who wants to use paper money when you have something like this? And so I imagine that the transformation that this is going to create is dramatic. And we've already seen some websites come about, like replacements for Facebook, replacements for Twitter, that are using blockchain to decentralize the flow of information so that people can't block it. Okay, so let's keep going. Almost done. Bear with me. So in the Silica Nexus backstory, we're going to let players explore as many worlds as possible. They could be fantasy, science fiction, or anything that pretty much you can dream up. I'm creating a layer of logic that will hold this together. But thousands of other artists, coders, and musicians and storytellers will be most of what the Silica Nexus universe becomes. I really only want to create just the most minor glue, something that ties it together with some kind of lore so that they can't break that, even if it's fantasy versus Wild West. And I've got that almost worked out. I mean, there's more work to do, but we're getting very close. These creatives, you look at something like Star Citizen, where they've spent so many years on this project, and they've spent so many tens of millions and probably hundreds of millions of dollars at this point. And it just keeps getting bigger. It's got this feature creep about it and I love it. I mean, it's a beautiful project, but I'm thinking, you guys, you're refining it to the point where I'm wondering if we'll ever get to play this game in its full form. And I hope we will, because it's a beautiful creation. But they're controlling the content in such a way where, how can they ever do it? How can they ever finish it? Because they've shown us the work that they've done on some of the worlds, and it's absolutely gorgeous, but this has to be tweaked by hand. And then they're randomly generating other worlds using procedural technology, or they're doing the major part of the planet that way, which is obviously you have to do. You can't generate thousands of square miles of content by hand. It would be impossible. But you also can't do it if you're a confined group of people. So we want to open the doors. We want to let other companies come in and start building their own worlds. And we're going to connect them together using our core technology. So we'll distribute APIs and things that can allow them, and tools that allow them to develop worlds, but they can also develop worlds using their own tools or tools of choice. Something like Unity or another application or another engine. And so when they do this, they get paid in droid tokens. And so everyone gets involved, and there's a vested interest in the success of the project, because those tokens, they want to maintain their value or increase their value. So it's a very positive thing. All right, we're almost there. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to build an app, the Sarah app, social augmented reality app. And the Sarah app is kind of like, you know, what you would have with a Pokemon app. But this has a bit more of a purpose, I think. You allow players to earn droids or parts of droids we call nanites. There's 100 million of them in every droid. And these nanites, you can gather them by finding resources, you know, scavenger hunts, things like that. You can battle Nexus portals to stop the baddies that are coming through and balance the Earth and our magnetic field. There's a backstory there somewhere. It's like Pokemon Go, but more of a purpose, and the players could be directed to show up at your business, where they will spend our tokens and their cash on your products. Imagine how this could drive customers to a location like Dave & Buster's. We also need to educate the public about this kind of entertainment, because like cryptocurrency, a lot of people, they've seen it and they've heard of it, but they've not gotten to try it personally. So to do this, we want to create the Nexus Station Family Entertainment Centers, and you may have already heard some about this, to connect people from places all over the world and give them access to bleeding edge technologies in this space. Can you see the potential? Well, we've been working on this for some time now. If you did the math, it's been about 3 years from the Oculus till now, 3.5 years from that moment till now. So some of us have been putting hundreds, even thousands of hours into this at this point. And even more recently, we've got people traveling all over the place just to get the word out. So the potential of the Silicon Nexus virtual universe economy is hard to imagine. And I can imagine quite a bit, to quote Han Solo. We've started this, and I want you to help us realize it.
Thank you, Tom. Do we have any questions for Tom? Thank you for getting all that into the one presentation. I appreciate that.
Any questions?
Oh, we have a question.
Okay.
I heard you wanted us to get involved.
I do.
Aha.
Well, you've already seen part of it, is the ICO website that we showed you. And fund.siliconnexus.com, the fund page. And that has, well, I had help. Okay, there's a lot of people involved. But that page has a lot of content on it, fund.siliconnexus.com. And you could see a lot of what's going on there. You also get a nice preview of the backstory, which is kind of cool. Anything?
So I think what you guys are doing is really cool, creating cross-platform and
Thank you.
cross-reality experiences. Could you talk a little bit about how developers would contribute to this network of realities in kind of a seamless way?
Well, it can't be seamless until we put some tools in place, you know, and part of that is getting together the funding and the personnel necessary to build those tools. It's a great idea, and I say that with no bias whatsoever. But I think it's going to require a lot of effort and dozens, if not hundreds, of people just on the inside constructing the infrastructure necessary to pull it off. And we know we can do it. We have a great team, and we got some other people standing by. They just need to be paid. So hopefully soon. And when that happens, we'll build whatever we need as far as conversion tools to move the data from an engine like Unity into our core, and so we can connect the dots there. All right. Is that it?
Perfect. Thanks, you.
All right. Thank you all.